Hi, I'm Brian Lord, president of Premier Speakers Bureau and your host of the Beyond Speaking podcast. Our guest today is Rocky Bleier. Rocky is a national champion in college football with Notre Dame. He's a four-time Super Bowl champion. He's an Army veteran and also just has this amazing story of fighting back. When we were looking at speakers that we wanted to have, we're coming up on the Super Bowl. So four-time Super Bowl champion, great for that. We're coming up into 21, and if there was ever a year for fighting back, 2021 is it. So Rocky is a great speaker for that. And then finally, Rocky was the first speaker that I ever booked at Premier in January of 2021 years ago. I booked Rocky for my very first event here at Premier. So Rocky, thank you so much for joining us here on the Beyond Speaking podcast.
Thank you.
So Rocky, we're recording this here just days before the Super Bowl. We've got an epic matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs, defending Super Bowl champion, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Tom Brady at the quarterback position. So Rocky, to put you on the spot right off the bat, who are you picking to win this Super Bowl?
Well, I tell you what, and I'm probably picking it from my heart. But I also think that they have a great chance, and that's I'm picking Tampa Bay. And the reason that I'm picking Tampa Bay is just to see their progress throughout the season, how they started and losing games early, and then all of a sudden gelling together and having this great momentum as they went into the playoffs, going for them. And their fan base is exciting. The fact is that they have Tom Brady, which is a big factor there from a leadership point of view, from an experience point of view, and then watching that team buy into one another and carry that momentum. Now, as we well know, it's he who makes the least amount of mistakes and will eventually win that game. But I think that the way they've played and in the playoffs and in the championship game, they'll continue into the Super Bowl. And it'll be a tight game, but I think that they'll come out on top.
So, right now we're in 2021, which is, coming off 2020, which is one of the more unique years that we've ever had. And, your story of fighting back, playing Notre Dame, being a national champion with an amazing team. I think you only gave up something like 20, 30 points all season, which is amazing. And then being drafted into the military, going to Vietnam. Can you walk us through, I know that's a longer story, but maybe just some of the points of that story. And then, what that changed in your life.
Well, obviously, as you were telling the story, and I was very happy to be able to be drafted in the NFL. And so I was a highly touted 16th round draft choice. Doesn't even exist anymore. And so I was the 417th person picked playing in the draft. But I think because of the coaching that I received at Notre Dame and the fundamentals that were taught got me into the NFL. And I was one of four rookies to make the team that year. And so it was 1968, height of the war that was taking place. Basically, I just fell through the cracks and I got my 1A classification during that season after 10 games. And I got drafted into the Army and boom, you're gone, and ended up in Vietnam. As the story goes, then got wounded twice. And the prognosis was I'd not be able to come back and play. Again, because of the injuries that had taken place. Well, it's kind of a mindset, and I suppose the mindset becomes very important no matter what you do and how we even get through this pandemic and what our future is and overcoming obstacles. And the mindset was, I didn't lose a limb, damaged, but, when you play sports, you get hurt. You get pulls, you get you might have tears here, there, and you get sore, but you learn that in time they heal, and ultimately you go back and play. So in the backyard, in the neighborhood, in organized sports in college, that was kind of the myth. So as I thought about my opportunity, and that's what it was, and the Steelers were kind enough to allow me to come back. They bought me a couple years. They put me in injured reserve. I made the taxi squad. For whatever reason they saw, they gave me that chance. And so you have to do something with that opportunity. And I was able to get myself back into shape and finally be able to make the team, playing special teams in 1972. Then all of a sudden in 72, things kind of change. Franco Harris comes in and becomes a rookie of the year as a running back. We go to the playoffs, and we have the one play that changes the course and direction of the team called the immaculate reception, deflected pass in the last seconds of the game to be able to score and win the game. So all of a sudden we get on a track. But I think the biggest thing is that, you don't give up. Hopefully you got to focus. And you get goals in which you want to achieve. I think in my mind, basically, is that, a lot of us were at times, you say, what if I would have done that? What if I worked out more? What if? And we question our own ability. And you get to a point where hopefully you go, I don't want to be able to ask myself, what if down the line, if I didn't make the team, I should have done this, I should have done that. So you kind of embrace as best you possibly can all those what ifs, and then wherever that takes you, at least you're not living in the past and making excuses, but you go, okay, fine, it didn't work out. My life goes in a different direction, and hopefully I can set another goal and path to be able to achieve it. Well, we get a chance to make the team, we get a chance to play, and then because of an injury here or there, you know how the game goes. And all of a sudden, like 1974, I'm in the starting backfield with Franco, and we go to the Super Bowl for the first time. And then we play 6 more years together, and we win 4 more Super Bowls. And I get a nice career after 11 years in playing in the NFL.
What was your most memorable Super Bowl moment?
Probably my most probably my most memorable was Super Bowl 13. My Super Bowl 13. So the third time that we were in the Super Bowl, we're playing Dallas Cowboys for the second time, and it was right before the half, and we had the ball, and we're on the 7-yard line. It was 3rd and 1 for a first down, keep the momentum going, and the play was just a quick pass play to the halfback myself, where I go right down the line of scrimmage. Bradshaw would throw it to me. I'd catch it, fall over the line to pick up the first down or pick up whatever yardage I could. And so the ball was snapped, and I broke out of my stance, and my opponent jumped across and took my path. I couldn't get down the line of scrimmage, so I cut it short and just all of a sudden found myself upfield. And Bradshaw, had to respond. I wasn't down the line of scrimmage, so he starts to scramble, and then he throws the ball at the last minute to me in the end zone. And I see it coming in, and I had a leap. I didn't think I was good. My thought at that moment of time was that if I could get my fingers on it, if I could just push it down, it might fall into my hands. And I throw my hands up, and it thunk. It stuck right there, and I come down. And as I tell people, I don't know how high I jumped, maybe 18, 19, 20 feet. I forget after all these years. It was pretty high. But anyway, so that gave us a lead. That gave us a lead. And then a lead ultimately, as we say, that we never relinquished thereafter. But that was probably, the thing. And it made the cover of Sports Illustrated, which is always nice. But here's the interesting thing, Brian, is that I had a chance to go back and take a look at, because after years, you say, well, what kind of game did I have? Okay, so I had one pass. What kind of game did you have? You don't think about it. How many times did you carry the ball, and so on and so on. So I went back and looked at the statistics. So in the statistics was this. I carried the ball twice for 2 yards. I caught one pass and recovered one onside kick. but I made the cover of Sports Illustrated because of that one pass. So it's only, all it has to take is just one big play to be able to make a difference within a team.
So do you have any good stories? Like, I love little behind the scenes Super Bowl stories. So that's an amazing one that everybody's seen, but or a whole lot of people have seen. What's maybe some of the behind the scenes stories from the Super Bowl or leading up to it that you could share?
Well, one of them is this. This is, and we're going back to the first time we're playing the Dallas Cowboys. So this was in '75, of the '75 season, and so we're playing down in Miami in the game. So it was towards the end of the game. We had lead. It was in the fourth quarter. Maybe we had 2 minutes left in the quarter. Bradshaw had just throw a touchdown to Lynn Swan to give us a lead, and in that course he got knocked out of the game. He got hit by the linebacker. Okay, and so Terry Hanratty was our backup quarterback. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, we scored. We kick off to them. They drive the ball down, and they score. They kick off to us. We get the ball. Now the clock's ticking down. We still have a lead. Here's the situation. It's fourth down. We got the ball on the 40-yard line. It's fourth down, 7 yards to go. Well, you're thinking, okay, fine, let's just punt the ball, get it down deep, let the defense take over from there and be able to stop the opponent. All of a sudden, there's a timeout at the sidelines. Timeout? What's going on in timeout? We leave the offense on the field. I'm thinking, we got to punt the ball. Or if you're not going to punt the ball, then you got to throw the ball downfield. And if they intercept it, it's like a punt, but we got to eat it sometime. We're going to run the ball. Got to give it to Franco. Because that's what he does. And so Terry Henry runs off to the sidelines, comes back in. And so I go, okay, what's the play? What's the play? He goes, what's the play? He doesn't tell me. Gets in the huddle. He goes, all right, full right split. That's the formation. 84 trap on 2. I'm going, 84 trap. That's a strong side trap where I'm carrying the ball. 7 yards. I'm going, and as we break the huddle, he said, run out as much time as you can. And I'm going, I'm not a run out guy. Franco's a run out guy. I'm an A to B guy. I'm an A to B. And I thought, this is the worst play that's ever called in the history of the Super Bowl at this time in this location. And the reason that Chuck wanted to run the ball was that they had blocked one of our punts earlier, and he just didn't want to give them that position to do so. And the ball was snapped. Hanratty spins around, gives me the ball, boom, 2 yards. And we give it back to him. And it was like 2 seconds off the clock. I didn't run anything off the clock. It was like the clock had stopped. Whoop, it started again. Boom. And I thought, that was the worst call in the history of the NFL, of the Super Bowl, that play specifically. Fortunately, they get the ball and they start moving it. And they get the ball back and they move it. And they move it down the field and move it down the field, throw into the end zone. We intercept it in the end zone to win the game. But I felt really bad on the sidelines thinking that I lost this game because I couldn't pick up the 7 yards that were needed to, but in my mind, I still think that was a bad choice.
Oh, goodness. So, one of the things too, just getting back to the bigger picture, a lot of people right now are going through some difficult times. And part of that, I think, in your story too, is going back and facing those difficult times. So not long ago, ESPN did a really big story with you of going back to Vietnam, going back to the place where this terrible thing had happened to you. Can you walk us through maybe one, how that came about, and then just what happened while you were there?
Actually, that whole process, and I forgot about it. It was like a 10-year process before we went back. We're going to go do it for the 40th anniversary, and so then all of a sudden, schedules got screws put on the shelf, and then anyway, they came back and they said, "Well, we'd like to go back to Vietnam. Would you like to go back to Vietnam?" And I'm thinking, yeah, I guess. I mean, it would be fine. And I think that you have to put it in the perspective of this, is that I really didn't need it to go back to Vietnam. It wasn't a big thing that I, had to heal or get back in touch. And so let's just put this in perspective, unlike the majority of returning Vietnam veterans during that period of time in the latter part of the 60s, in the 70s, was that because of the feeling about the American population about that war, that the soldier was identified with the conflict. And so he was looked down upon, unlike today, where we thank our soldiers for their service. The Vietnam veteran was spat upon. He wasn't accepted. There was no place for him to go to be able to talk about their experiences and so on. And VFW didn't really embrace them. American Legion didn't embrace that veteran. And so they had to repress their feelings, go about their lives, and adapt as best they possibly could. I, on the other hand, only because I came back to play this game of football, became a story. So I became a story. And so I had to talk about my feelings. Well, how do you feel? How does it, how do you relate? What's the correlation between football and being in the service? So I had to come up with the answers. And so I talked about it, and I talked about it, and I talked about it for 40 years. And I continue to talk about it in that regard. So there was a big catharsis for me because I got it out, and so going back, I said, I don't know what to expect, really, in all honesty, only because I've talked about it all these many years, and I've come to, a pretty good conclusion about my feelings and so on. I didn't have any really traumatic experiences of atrocities that took place, although we were in firefights and we were under pressure. But so we go back, and so we were out in the field, and we finally found the exact spot where the firefight had taken place and where I got hit. And so Tom Rinaldi asked me the question. He said, "How do you feel?" And out of the blue, honest to God, Brian, out of the blue, out of left field, all of a sudden this emotion came back to me that I thought was buried or not necessary. I mean, from the soles of my feet came up through my body this emotional setback, and all of a sudden I started to cry, and I couldn't understand why, and I just really got sick. I mean, so to the point where just my internal intestines needed to flow out of me. And so ultimately I went back and sat down, and I passed out. And so came to, it wasn't long, and the whole crew was like, "Oh my God, what happened to this guy?" I mean, you're supposed to protect him. Yeah, I know he's old, but geez. But it gave me a sense. It just gave me a sense of trauma that can be experienced by humanity or by soldiers in stressful times, that I can understand mental health problems because of that kind of a trauma. I mean, this was years later that I felt that sadness that had taken place. People feel it at different times, and soldiers feel it at different times. So it really kind of gave me personally that insight of post-traumatic stress and how it affects us. not only in because of combat, but it happens in first responders. It happens within major trauma to our personal lives, accidents, losing people, and so on. That can affect us. It can affect us, and so that was, that was my response. And I'm glad, there's part of that the story that I was glad I was able to come back and go through that, and maybe gave me a closing that I thought I had before, that really meant something at this time. So, yeah.
What advice would you give to people who have gone through difficult things?
I think the biggest thing is that it's very difficult to talk about trauma. I mean, it's difficult if you go through it. And what needs to be done is that it needs to be talked about. In those experiences as best possibly can. If it be professional help in some regards, it could be with family, but it has to be confronted. And I really believe that. Just the ability to talk about your experience, whatever that experience was, that has been harmful or impactful, of having to go through some atrocities and or personal injuries, that we don't do as human beings necessarily. But I think that is the first step, to be able to admit it, look at it, and be able to move forward, and that we're not invincible. And so, human traits are, we don't talk about that. Human traits are, we're tough people, and we're not sensitive. We don't, need to express that. Well, but we do. And I think that's probably the most important thing at the time, is just be able to do that, and to talk about what has happened. So that's it.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we like to do in this podcast is get questions from different people. And this one, and I know I mentioned this to you off here beforehand, but one of the biggest Pittsburgh Steelers fans ever is our silent producer, Eric. And so he came up with some specific questions for you that he's curious about. He being a huge Steelers fan, huge Rocky Bleier fan. So the first one he had was, how did you handle being told you wouldn't be able to play again?
Oh, so my mindset of not being able to be played again was, as I had mentioned before, was a simple fact that, injuries are a part of whatever our lives are. You get serious injuries. You get, in college, I had a torn ligament, my knee. So that you overcome that, and you come back and you do the things that are necessary to go and play. So when people said that, I just kind of took it as a grain of salt, as they say, and not really internalize it. It didn't become an excuse for me. So I wanted to erase those excuses, as we talked about. So I became very, focused. I think the biggest thing is, to be able to get rid of all those would'ves and could'ves and should'ves that we carry in our lives. If I would have done this, if I would have worked out harder, if I would have, and so that's the best thing that you can possibly do, is if you possibly can, is try to focus on what needs to be done at the moment of time, get yourself back in shape to be able to play, and then hopefully get an opportunity. So you can only control what you can control, and that was getting my body in shape. Was the only thing I could control. I couldn't control whether I made the team or not. That was left up to somebody else. But that was my response.
What made football the sport that you wanted to fight so hard to get back to?
Because I think that well, what? It was a recognition, all right? I think all of us like to be recognized for something. I enjoyed playing sports as a kid growing up, like everybody else, playing backyard. We had some success, and it wasn't because I was successful, it was you played on teams that were successful. And because of that, they just would raise your expectation. Plus the other fact, then you were identified with it. And so you became kind of successful. So I was at Notre Dame and we won a national championship. Well, that's pretty good. And I got a chance to be able to start during that period of time. So you got recognition for that. So you come to the Steelers and you make it in the pros. And so you're playing special teams, but you're there. And so that probably that ego recognition was very important to me. And then you go, oh, okay, fine. I had that focus. It wasn't as if I wanted to do anything else. I mean, it wasn't as if I wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer or, run the bar back in Appleton, Wisconsin. So football was kind of that avenue that set you aside. People recognized you, get a little pat on the back for, being a part of a professional team and making that status. So that fed one's ego. And so you wanted to do better and do better and do better. And I was kind of the guy, that I was very coachable, so I was all the way through. And I would do whatever anybody would tell me to do and focused on, how to get better, and so that just kind of helped me as I went through. Things didn't come naturally, but you worked on them, and so and so that became a driving force as well.
Mm-hmm. What was that first training camp like back in the 70s?
Well, when I came back, the first was just, you're back, trying to make the team, and you hopefully get an opportunity, and so you're just back within that realm of going back to training camp again. Basically, that wasn't anything, different. It was still the unknown. It was like being a rookie again. And you never know what's going to happen. And hopefully you get a chance to at least show, prove, or something. And, and I went through that first year. That first training camp, and it was tough. I might have come back a little too soon, because it just, it took a toll on my body. And there were things that I just couldn't do. I mean, my foot actually, it was, I just 2-a-day sessions beating up, and I was limping, and I was trying to get through, and that was a tough thing. And so anyway, but you got it. I got all the way through, and I remember I came into the locker room at the end of the last day. It was the last day of training camp, and I thought, oh, well, okay. Nobody said anything yet, and so I'm in my locker, and then all of a sudden, Ralph Berlin, who was our trainer, and he was what we called the Turk. He was the one that would inform you that the coach would like to see you. So he stops in. I'm looking around, thinking, oh, well, maybe. He stops in. He says, "The Rocky said, Chuck would like to see you." Kiss of death was, and bring your playbook. So that was. I'm going, oh, okay, fine. So I went to see Chuck. He got up and he said, we waived you today, and I want you to go home, do what's necessary, get yourself back in shape, and or whatever, and come back next year.
Mm.
And I argued with him. I don't know where I got this gumption. I said, "You sure? Are you sure?" "Yes." "Oh, okay. Can I practice today? I mean, can I go to, I didn't know what else to do. And so it let me go to practice. And it was finally when I went to practice, I'm thinking, what am I doing at practice? It was over with. Well, and so I was heartbroken, obviously, because of this situation. And the next morning I got a call from Dan Rooney. And Dan, who was then president of the club, Art's son, had taken over, and he said, "I'm sorry I wasn't there yesterday." He said, "I talked to Chuck, and we're not going to take up a roster spot, but we're going to put you in injured reserve. I want our doctors to take a look at you and see if there's something they can do, and maybe you can come back and help us towards the end of the season."
Wow.
So I had some shrapnel that was working its way out my foot. So we had another operation and broke up some scar tissue, but they bought me a year and they paid me a salary, and I was hanging around and went through rehab, and then eventually come back to meetings and kind of being there, suited up, and then came back the following year, a little bit better. So you never know where the opportunities would come, and so they gave, as I said before, they gave me that chance, that opportunity. But that's what that unknown first season was like coming back.
Mm-hmm. So you've had so many changes in your life, from playing at Notre Dame, Vietnam, being with the Steelers. What was the transition like to become a really successful speaker, and then also having a one-man play?
Well, thank you very much for bringing that up. From being a speaker, okay, so let's take it from that end, and that's where we started. Is that it just didn't happen. So he got invited to do sports banquets, early on, and the only reason is that I had somewhat of a story, and somebody said, "Well, would you come and talk to the grade school sports banquet?" And you go, "Okay, fine." And so as I tell people, I wrote a speech. I wrote a speech, and it was like basically like this speech, okay, and I have it here, and I take it out and hold it and say, it will go something like this: "Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to be here. A lot of things have happened to me over the last couple of years, some of them good and some of them bad." Then, like after 2-3 years, I could go, "Ladies and gentlemen, a lot of things have happened to me over the last couple of years, some of them good and some of them bad." Then after 3 or 4 more years, I could put it on 3x5 cards. "Ladies and gentlemen, a lot of things have happened to me over the last couple of years, some of them good and some of them bad." And that was the beginning. Now, because we won, okay, because we were winning Super Bowls, then we became popular. And because we became popular, you had a story to tell. And so I think I did every sports banquet in Western Pennsylvania, eastern part of Ohio, upstate New York, and the panhandle of West Virginia in that area. And so that becomes a basis of being able to tell a story, and you recreate it, and you put jokes and stories. And then after I retired, I thought, well, that was the end of it. Mm-hmm. That was the end of it. Until somebody calls, like Brian Lord. Would you do this? And you go, oh, okay, fine. And so that's how it developed, and that's became a basis. And then you try to, be informative and try to take care of the customer and the audience and give them a story, and relate it to their personal lives as well. And, and then you become a speaker. You're on the circuit, as they say.
So, Rocky, you've got this really successful one-man play. Can you tell us about that as well?
Well, yeah, thank you. And it's called The Play with Rocky Bleier, and it was written by Gene Collier, who is a sports writer here in Pittsburgh and has written some screenplays in the past. And so we've been able to perform it, but it takes place in three bars, basically going over my life, and goes back to Appleton, Wisconsin, and we start talking about Appleton and the characters that I grew up with and the people within that area, and then it morphs into a Pittsburgh bar, and we talk about Pittsburgh and the Steelers, and then going into the military, as we talked about before. And then the third bar is my home bar, a reflective bar, in which we then talk about what makes the Steelers, what kept them together for that period of time. And so then we go back and we talk about the Super Bowls, but then we talk about Super Bowl 13, in which we discussed earlier, and the impact that had. And so it's been well, excellent production. And not because I'm starring in it, but the set and the sound and everything that makes a live performance was really brought to fruition. So we're very happy to be able to continue to do it and present it. And we've had the opportunity to move it around the country and perform it in different venues around the country. So it was a great experience to be able to do that, and it was a lot of fun.
Well, Rocky, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Your message resonates so well right now with where we are as a country, and obviously with the sports world as well. So we really appreciate you coming on and being a guest on the Beyond Speaking podcast.
Brian, thank you very much. And here's to a 2021, a better year. So
absolutely. And for those tuning in, make sure to go to Beyond Speaking podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. And also check out Rocky Bleier at premierspeakers.com. Thanks again so much.